I saw this chart that I wanted to share with you. Apparently, Germans were asked, who is the greatest threat to world peace? Now, I'm a fan of these sorts of questions in general because I think you get some fascinating answers. But this was very, very definitive from German citizens who they think is the biggest threat to world peace. They have Trump number one, 41%. Second, Kim Jong-un, 17%, less than half. The Ayatollah is at 8%, Vladimir Putin at 8%, and Xi Jinping at 7%. So it's a YouGov survey, and German citizens say Trump is the biggest threat to world peace. That might sound shocking to many of you, or I don't know, in my audience, maybe not. But there's a trend here that I wanted to bring up. So I don't know if you guys remember this. This is all the way back in 2014. There was a poll that asked people the world over, which country is the biggest threat to world peace? And the answer was overwhelmingly the United States of America. So let's go through this. The United States is the greatest threat to world peace. That's the finding of an end-of-the-year Win Gallup International survey of people in 65 countries. Of the 66,000 people polled, just under a quarter named Uncle Sam as the greatest threat to world peace. Other menaces didn't even come close. 8% was the next close one. We're over 20%. 8% is the next close one. And 8% named Pakistan. 6% named China. 4% said Iran. And 4% also said Israel. I want to reiterate, guys. 66,000 people polled. They say, oh, the U.S. is the greatest threat to world peace. You ready for my hot take? They're mostly correct. They're mostly correct. To be fair to Trump, I would say he was the greatest threat to world peace when he was in office. Right now, I'd say it's probably Biden, right? But you have to put very close to the top Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin. Okay? So, in fact, you may even have, well, Netanyahu couldn't do what he's doing without the funding and arming of the United States. So I guess it's fair to say Biden is the bigger threat because he's facilitating all of it. But Netanyahu really is the guy who's pulling the trigger and doing the actual genocide, right? So I don't know. I'll ask you guys, who do you think is a bigger threat to peace at the moment? Is it Joe Biden or is it Benjamin Netanyahu? But certainly the top three, it's going to be whoever the sitting U.S. president is, Netanyahu, and Vladimir Putin. And of course, the reason why Vladimir Putin is there is because he did an illegal and offensive invasion of Ukraine, pretended like, oh, this is defensive and it's all about NATO aggression and all this stuff. Bullshit. In the many interviews he's done, including with Tucker, he makes very clear that the history of the Russian Empire, and he feels like Ukraine is a fake state and it's mine and I want to take it. I want to rebuild a Russian Empire. So all the other stuff is just rationalizations and justifications. So he's on the wrong side of that equation. So I'd say when Trump was in office, he was the greatest threat, followed by Netanyahu and Putin. And then now I'd say it's Biden, Netanyahu, and Putin. Curious what order you guys would put it in. But to make the obvious point about the United States, we support, what's the exact number? I'm blanking on the number, but I think it's here. I'm going to pull it up. Just to give you a little taste of why the U.S. and whoever leads the U.S. at the moment might be considered the greatest threat to world peace. We provide military assistance to 73% of the world's dictatorships. Yeah, if you're doing that, you are almost by definition the greatest threat to world peace because you are arming these dictators to pacify their populations by any means necessary, including throwing them in jail without due process, torturing them. You know, we arm brutal and vicious regimes like Saudi Arabia. We've aided and abetted the genocide that they did in Yemen. We're now aiding and abetting the genocide Israel's doing in Gaza. So when you're the number one arms dealer in the world and you're the world's sole superpower, you're the biggest and baddest on the block. Yeah, hand in hand with that is you're going to be viewed as the most dangerous. And you know what? That's correct. And our track record sort of proves it. Now, by the way, whoever becomes, let's say there's going to come a time when China replaces us as the world's sole superpower? Well, at the time, they'll probably be the biggest threat to world peace. Because whoever wears that crown usually they do a lot of negative things in the process. To get to that place, you have to do a lot of negative things. And so, I mean, this is just one example, but, you could also bring up, obviously, the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan. That first poll that I showed you was from 2014, still in Iraq, still in Afghanistan, still doing the drone war all over the place where, 90% of the time they kill the wrong people, have over 800 military bases around the world, have a very antagonistic policy towards anybody who's not one of our allies, right? We've seen that time and time again. So, I think it's fair to say that we are the biggest threat to world peace, or whoever is the U.S. president is the greatest threat to world peace, and followed by Netanyahu and Putin. And I don't know, man. This is one of those conversations where I feel like talking to you, people in my audience, all of you are like, duh, like, of course, right? But bringing this up to a normie, like, hey, in 2014, they said the U.S. is the greatest threat to world peace. And bringing up the recent poll, 41% say Trump is the biggest threat to world peace, German citizens. I feel like a normie might be like, whoa, what? That's crazy. But that's only because you haven't taken a moment to step outside of your own personal viewpoint and framework and identity and try to view it more objectively, which is why consistently every time this question is asked, the results are similar. Now, by the way, I will say, I don't know what these German citizens were thinking, though, not putting Putin above Kim Jong-un, not having Netanyahu on the list at all. Well, to be fair, Germany really sucks off Israel because, German history is, they haven't been too kind to Jews. So maybe they're like overcompensating now by like bending the knee to Israel and supporting them as they do whatever the hell they want, including massacring Palestinian civilians. So maybe that's why they don't have it up there. But to not have Vladimir Putin above Kim Jong-un, I don't know. I find that kind of silly. So not to say that this poll is something where I agree with every aspect of it, but you're always going to get a similar answer when you asked about the biggest threats to world peace. Maybe you get a different, if you ask the US population, maybe the UK population, the Canadian population, maybe the Australian population, these might be the only places where they don't say the US is the biggest threat. But I think almost everywhere else, they would say that. And it's by simple virtue of the fact that we arm 73% of the world's dictatorships. We oftentimes violate or disregard international law and U.S. law when it comes to foreign policy, torture policy at Guantanamo Bay, illegal and offensive wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, broader Middle East war, shadow war in Africa, which we've talked about on this show before, drone war, I don't know if I brought that up or not, and also arming and funding some of the most atrocious regimes on the planet, like the Saudi Arabian regime, the Israeli regime. If you're like the kingpin and the supplier of all of the worst scumbags, then you're kind of the king scumbag. And that's what this reflects. And it may be ugly and might be something you don't want to hear, but you should hear it. I don't know why they put Trump instead of Biden for this poll, right? But it's whoever the U.S. president is at the time is usually the greatest threat to world peace. And that would be a relatively obvious conclusion to anybody who is not in the belly of the beast and brainwashed by U.S. propaganda.
Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.